The sun hung low in the western sky, casting long shadows that stretched across the worn earth of the Broken Spoke Ranch. Dust motes danced like fading stars in the light, giving life to the parched land that bore witness to countless sorrows. A wooden fence sagged under the weight of time, its splintered planks telling stories of both hardship and resilience. The air was thick with the scent of dried grass and the faint smoke of a cooking fire nearby, where the rancher, a weathered man with hands hardened by toil, prepared a simple meal as he had done many evenings before. Across the expanse, a rusted windmill creaked, swaying lightly in the gentle breath of the evening breeze. The rancher glanced up from his task, his tired eyes scanning the horizon. This was a land of solitude, yet it was the silence that hung around him like an unwelcome guest. Loneliness had become an old friend, familiar with the contours of his heart. He had buried dreams as deep as the soil beneath his feet, each loss a stone added to the weight he carried. His days were filled with chores, but the nights echoed with memories of the laughter that once filled this place. The life he had built now a mere ghost. Meanwhile, a small figure appeared in the distance, silhouetted against the fading light. The rancher squinted, unsure if he were imagining things. It was a child, a girl, perhaps no older than 8, with hair tousled by the wind and clothes that were too big for her slight frame. She stood at the edge of the property, clutching a small tattered doll. The rancher's heart twisted. Her presence was a jarring reminder of innocence lost, drawing forth a pang of empathy that he had long buried beneath layers of grief and resentment. As she approached, the girl's breath came in quick, uneven bursts, and the rancher noted the tear-streaked cheeks and red-rimmed eyes that spoke of recent suffering. "My daddy died today," she whispered, her voice barely rising above the hum of the evening. The rancher's breath caught in his throat. He offered no words, just a nod, feeling the weight of her loss resonating with the emptiness that haunted him. They stood in silence, a gulf filled with unspoken understanding, two souls marred by life's cruel hand. "Can I spend a day with you, rancher?" she finally asked, her small voice trembling with hope, as if the simple request could pull her from the abyss. He studied her, noting the fragility of her spirit, yet within it, a flicker of resilience that reminded him of his own childhood. The air was thick with unshared burdens, the lingering essence of despair, a heavy shawl that clung to both of them. In that moment, something shifted, a connection forged in silence, a fragile bond that might bridge the chasm of their individual heartaches. "Sure, little one," he replied, the words unexpected even to himself. It felt like opening a door he had long kept shut, a door that led to the possibility of healing. "You can stay forever," he added, the finality of his words hanging in the air like an unspoken promise. The girl's eyes widened, hope igniting like a spark in the darkness, and for the first time in many years, the rancher felt the stirrings of warmth in his chest. Perhaps together they could mend the rifts that life had carved into their souls, finding solace in each other's company within the vast, lonely stretches of the Broken Spoke Ranch. As twilight deepened into shades of indigo, a figure emerged from the shadows, moving swiftly along the ridge that skirted the Broken Spoke Ranch. The rancher, his gaze still fixed on the little girl, sensed the change in the air. There was a presence that didn't belong to him or her. A silhouette detached itself from the encroaching darkness, tall and lean, with a coat that billowed like storm clouds around a narrow frame. The rancher squinted, the outline becoming clearer with each step, revealing a man whose features were obscured by a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, casting a shadow across his face. The girl, seemingly oblivious to the newcomer, continued to stand before the rancher, her small hands gripping the doll as if it were a talisman against the uncertainties of the world. She was a fragile beacon of innocence amidst the encroaching night, her vulnerability palpable. The rancher felt the unsteady rhythm of his heart quicken, a mix of concern and protectiveness swelling within him. He turned his attention to the figure approaching them, curiosity blending with unease. The man moved with purpose, boots crunching softly on the gravel, yet the quietness of his steps belied the weight of his presence. As he drew nearer, the rancher caught fleeting glimpses of the stranger's weathered skin, etched with lines of age and experience, and a scruff of stubble that lent an air of neglect. There was something familiar, yet unsettling, about the way the man carried himself, shoulders hunched as if bearing a heavy load, one not unlike his own. He was the living embodiment of the land around them, rugged, worn and marked by time. Through the dust and twilight, the rancher felt the stirrings of caution. After all, not all figures that appeared on the horizon brought comfort or hope. The man paused, nodding toward the girl, his voice rough like gravel, but underlined with a soft sincerity. "She's lost, isn't she?" The rancher hesitated, caught off guard by the stranger's perception. The words hung in the air, heavy with an understanding that cut deep. The rancher's grip on the shovel, the lone tool set beside him, tightened reflexively, though he said nothing, knowing the truth of it resonated within them both. The girl, unaware of the tremors of adulthood that swirled around her, merely clutched the doll tighter and looked up at the man, her innocence unwavering. "I reckon we all have our losses," the stranger continued, his gaze shifting to the ragged landscape beyond them, as if it held the answers to unasked questions. The rancher felt the weight of the man's words settle upon his shoulders. An unspoken bond threaded them together, each man shaped by grief, yet standing defiantly against the melancholy that threatened to engulf them. Their scars were not so different, merely worn on different skins. The stranger's eyes glimmered, reflecting a flicker of recognition, a shared understanding of what it meant to carry the past like an anchor. With a sudden resolve, the rancher stepped forward, breaking the invisible barrier that had defined their interaction. "What's your name?" he asked, voice low, grounding the moment. The man hesitated, eyes darting toward the girl, who remained steadfast in her innocence, then exhaled deeply, the heaviness of his own name rising to the surface. "Daniel," he finally replied, a name that sounded like a whisper against the growing night. In that simple exchange, the air shifted, an unanticipated alliance beginning to take shape under the fading light as the three stood together in a fragile cocoon of understanding, each one drawn together by their shared losses, ready, perhaps, to face the dawn differently on the morrow. As night fell, the skies darkened to a slate gray, the vastness of the world around the Broken Spoke Ranch becoming an abyss of uncertainty. The rancher, standing before the girl and Daniel, felt the weight of the moment coalesce around them, each second charged with an unspoken promise. He watched as the little girl, her doll cradled like a treasure, peered at Daniel with wide, searching eyes. Even in the waning light, her small face was illuminated by the flickering glow of hope, a fragile candle flickering defiantly against the darkness. Daniel, rooted at the edge of their makeshift gathering, held the rancher's gaze for a long moment. It was a silent exchange, one filled with the raw weight of shared understanding. In Daniel's weathered features, the rancher perceived not just the scars of loss, but a yearning for connection, a desire to bridge the chasm that grief had carved into his own heart. He stepped forward, uncharacteristically drawn to the quiet strength that pulsed within the young girl and the stranger before him. The heaviness of their shared experience hung palpably in the air, and the rancher found himself yearning to defy that heaviness, to do something that might alter the course of their lives in this singular moment. After taking a breath that felt both light and heavy, he knelt down to the girl's eye level, the dust from the earth rising as if to envelop them both in a protective shroud. "What's your name?" he asked gently, his voice low to avoid shattering the fragile cocoon of trust that had begun to envelop them. The girl hesitated for a heartbeat, her brows knitting together as she considered her answer, as if the very act of naming herself was a declaration of defiance against the grief that clung to her. "Emma," she finally whispered, the name blooming in the night air like a fragile flower. The rancher nodded, cherishing that simple sound, for it was more than just a name. It was a declaration of presence, a thread that wove her into the fabric of the world around them. "Emma," he echoed, letting the name linger like the last rays of sun slipping below the horizon. In that echo, a connection grew, a gossamer thread binding them, providing something neither could articulate, but both felt deeply. "Emma, how about you help me with dinner?" The rancher's voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. "We can make some biscuits. You ever done that before?" Her eyes sparkled momentarily with surprise, a fleeting glimpse of the child she still was beneath the weight of her grief. She nodded eagerly, her small hands tightening around her doll. The rancher motioned toward a weathered wooden table that sat on the porch, an invitation that felt as liberating for him as it was for her. With each step toward the table, her once distant presence became tangible, and for the first time that evening, laughter filled the air as they baked together. Daniel stepped back, allowing the two to forge their bond, a sacred space in which they could weave their sorrows into something tangible. He observed from a distance the flicker of the fire reflecting off his solemn features. In this unexpected camaraderie, he felt a shift within himself, as if the acts of kindness unfurling before him were stirring the dormant warmth of his own heart, stirring echoes of a hope he had long thought lost. As Emma and the rancher began to knead the dough, flour dusting their hands and laughter mingling with the scent of smoke, Daniel felt an odd tug in his own chest. He had come to this place a ghost, burdened by his own past. But in witnessing this simple act of compassion, he was reminded that connection could still exist amidst suffering, a possibility to carve out a new path from the anguish of yesterdays. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, and as the stars began to prick the sky, the three of them formed a tentative enclave of healing, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, warmth can be found in unexpected places. As the evening settled into the hushed embrace of night, the flickering flames of the fire danced wildly against the darkness, casting shadows that flickered across the porch like memories. Emma and the rancher worked side by side, flour lightly dusting their clothes, an unspoken understanding emerging between them with each knead of the dough. It was an intimacy built not just on words, but through simple acts, a tangible foundation beneath the weight of their losses. Laughter rang out melodious and unexpected in the stillness of the ranch, an echo of childhood that clashed with the lingering sorrow that had hounded them both since the sun had begun its descent. Yet beneath the surface of shared laughter lay an undercurrent of tension, particularly for the rancher. He stole glances at Emma, her small hands deftly moving the dough, and felt a tightening in his chest. There was a fragility to her, an innocence still intact despite her recent tragedy that tugged at his heart. He was reminded all too sharply of his own daughter, who had danced in the same light, a bright beacon before the darkness had descended upon his life. The weight of that memory hung heavily, lingered like a shadow over the joy slowly forming in this moment. He found himself wrestling with an unquiet longing, an unfamiliar fear that his heart might be coaxed to open again, only to be shattered once more. Emma, innocent to the storm brewing in the rancher's heart, celebrated her small triumphs, fashioning the dough into uneven shapes, giggling as the rancher consistently turned the less-than-perfect biscuits into comical creatures. With each laugh, she forged a bond that felt refreshing yet perilous. "What do you think we should name this one?" she asked, glancing up with sparkling eyes that seemed to capture the very essence of starlight. He paused, taken aback. No longer could he merely sidestep the vulnerability she stirred within him. Her innocence beckoned to him, urging him to emerge from his fortress of solitude and embrace what he had so long forsaken. But as the fire snapped, sending sparks spiraling into the night, the rancher felt the tightness in his chest constrict again, a visceral reminder of his losses. A voice, the echo of his wife, drifted through his mind, warning him to guard his heart. He forced back a pang of resentment at her absence, his throat tightening. For a brief moment, he could see her smiling, hear her laughter, a haunting reminder of the joy that had once enveloped their home. Yet here stood this child, this reflection of all that remained unsaid. The conflict played out silently as he pictured the future, a path illuminated by hope, yet shadowed by the fear of heartbreak. Daniel lingered nearby, the warmth from the fire illuminating his weathered features and revealing the fragmented layers of his own past. He watched the interplay between the rancher and Emma, the way the rancher's smile lingered longer than it should, how his laughter came easier in the child's presence. He felt an urge to step forward, to remind them both of the fragility of this newfound connection, but the words lodged in his throat, heavy and unresolved. He had experienced the pain of attachment, had watched as connections unraveled beneath the weight of loss all too many times, and while hope flickered like the firelight, he too was uncertain of its strength. "Do you want to try one?" the rancher finally asked Emma, holding up a doe figure that bore a suspicious resemblance to a lopsided horse. The child's face lit up in a way that staved off the encroaching shadows, the tension of the evening momentarily lifted by her delight. It was a small victory, but a significant one nonetheless. The rancher's heart softened beneath the surface, and in that fleeting moment, he allowed himself to imagine a world where laughter could fill these empty spaces again. A world where joy might weave itself back into the fabric of his life. Their laughter echoed into the night, the rancher feeling for the first time in years that the weight upon his shoulders was lightening, if only just a little. The child beside him became an unexpected balm, shifting his perspective on loss and healing. For as they molded the biscuits, the warmth of their connection lingered, tempting him to let go of the burdens he had carried for too long. In the quiet, a flicker of hope took root within him, an invitation for healing that he had not dared to seek, even as the shadows loomed large. As the fire danced, a quiet intimacy enveloped the porch, each crackle whispering secrets of resilience and loss. Emma stood on her tiptoes, her small fingers deftly shaping the dough into a new creature, this one a crooked cat with exaggerated features. Laughter poured from her lips, carefree and uninhibited, a stark contrast to the sorrowful echoes that had settled like dust over the ranch. The rancher watched her, a flicker of warmth igniting within the hollow spaces of his heart, and for the first time he felt the joyful ache of connection, the bittersweet taste of what could be, even amidst the shadows of what had been. "Look!" Emma exclaimed, proudly presenting her lopsided creation, eyes sparkling in the firelight. "It's a kitty!" The rancher chuckled, unable to suppress the smile that stretched across his weathered face. In that moment, her laughter stitched together the ragged edges of his grief, weaving a fragile thread of hope between them. It felt both foreign and familiar, this act of sharing joy amid heartache, and although remnants of sadness lingered in the air like the scent of smoke, they shared the sweet buoyancy of laughter skirting around the edges of vulnerability. But with each soft chuckle, a tugging reminder of his own daughter nestled in the back of his mind. He recalled her laughter, the way she too would create whimsical animals from flour and water, her imagination unfurling like wildflowers in spring. The rancher's smile faltered momentarily, the chasm of his loss yawning wider as he thought of her vacant room, the echoes of her joy now just remnants of days gone by. Yet beside him stood Emma, her spirit unbroken, inviting him to see not just sorrow, but the potential for joy, a chance to reclaim fragments of his own lost laughter, a chance to shape a new chapter. "Can I name him?" Emma asked, bringing him back to the present, her voice bright with eager possibility. The rancher nodded, his heart swelling with an unfamiliar mixture of pride and protectiveness. "What do you want to call him?" She pondered for a moment, biting her lip in concentration before glancing up at him, her trust palpable. "I think I'll call him Mr. Whiskers," she declared triumphantly, her joy infectious. The rancher couldn't help but chuckle at the name. And with that small act of sharing, he felt the residual weight of loss begin to lift, allowing a space for new memories to etch themselves into the fabric of his heart. Yet within the humor of their shared endeavor lingered the weight of unspoken vulnerability. With each knead of the dough, he was reminded that the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Would he be able to nurture this connection? Could he protect her from the very darkness that had engulfed his own world? Emma, with her innocent spirit and unwavering hope, coaxed open the door to a possibility he had feared to entertain, a way to rediscover warmth and laughter even after years of isolation. Just then, the flames flickered higher in the fire pit, casting a glow that illuminated Emma's face, and a sudden swell of emotion surged within the rancher. He knelt back down to her level, the dirt beneath his knees grounding him. "Emma," he began, voice laden with sincerity, "I want you to know, if you stay here, I'll take care of you. You won't be alone anymore." The words felt like a promise, a bandage laid over a wound that had never truly healed. As the glow of the fire illuminated her small frame, he saw not just a child in need, but an opportunity to embrace the ties that could bind them together, to weave a new tapestry colored by shared laughter and healing. In the stillness that followed, Emma's eyes widened, shimmering with the reflection of hope ablaze in the night. "Really, I can stay forever," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread of disbelief and wonder. It was a question that echoed with potential, a question that embraced the very essence of their disparate lives. The rancher felt his heart quicken, knowing that in that moment they were stepping into uncharted territory, a world where two broken souls could dare to dream again, intertwined by the fragility of hope as they faced the darkness together. The flickering firelight cast dancing shadows across the porch as the rancher met Emma's gaze, a moment suspended in time. Her innocence sparkled like the stars overhead, and in her wide eyes he saw an undeniable hunger for connection, a yearning that mirrored his own buried desires. As the weight of his promise hung in the air, the world around them fell silent, all sounds muted by the gravity of their shared moment. The tightening in his chest softened, and he felt a shift within himself, a quiet but powerful acknowledgement that perhaps vulnerability could become a space for healing. As they knelt together, the rancher reached out, brushing flower dust from Emma's cheek with a tenderness he had thought long lost to him. The gesture, small yet profound, seemed to ignite a flicker of warmth between them, the kind of warmth that had been absent for far too long. Emma's lips curled into a smile, the kind that radiated pure light against the backdrop of uncertainty. He felt the corners of his mouth twitch up in response, a reaction both instinctual and real, as if with that touch they were sealing an unspoken agreement beneath the remnants of their sorrow. Daniel watched from the shadows, quietly observing the connection that blossomed between the rancher and Emma. He felt the tug of an ancient, instinctual urge to intervene, to disrupt the isolation that had long enveloped the rancher like a cloak. With cautious steps, he approached, the firelight illuminating the rough edges of his weathered face. As he drew near, he sensed the shift in energy, the fragile balance of sorrow and hope swirling around them. The rancher had opened a door, and Daniel, feeling its warmth, contemplated the weight of his own silence. If healing was to take root among them, it would require more than the mere act of existing side by side. It needed a bridge built on mutual understanding and connection. "Can I help?" Daniel asked softly, his voice rough yet genuine, aimed at both Emma and the rancher. The rancher looked up, surprise flickering across his features, then nodded slowly, recognizing the depth of what was being offered. Daniel stepped forward, an unexpected ally willing to share his own burdens in the spirit of solidarity. He knelt beside Emma, extending his hands to their work, an unforced invitation to join together in this act of creating something new, a meal to nourish not just their bodies, but their weary souls. Together, They were three figures woven into the fabric of the evening, each laboring over the dough with the shared intent of mending their collective wounds. Daniel's deft hands moved with purpose, and his presence added a warmth that rippled through the space between them. Emma watched, her eyes wide with admiration, and as she mimicked his movements, laughter bubbled up again, brightening the night with sounds that pushed against the darkness. Each gentle gesture between them, the kneading of dough, the brush of flour against small hands, became a transformative ritual, forging a bond stronger than either of them had anticipated. In the midst of their simple labor, the rancher caught Daniel's eye, a fleeting connection that communicated gratitude and recognition for the shared struggle they both bore. Daniel offered a nod, a tacit understanding that neither man was alone in their grief. As the warmth of the fire embraced them, the rancher felt the lingering heaviness of loss gradually dissipating, replaced by a nascent hope, the realization that in this moment they were more than their individual pain. They were united by the promise of a new beginning, ready to face the coming dawn together, reshaping their destinies within the tender, fragile light of their shared humanity. The fire crackled softly against the encroaching darkness, the warmth of its glow wrapping the three figures in an embrace that felt both fragile and essential. As they continued to knead the dough, laughter spilled forth from Emma, her eyes twinkling with a brightness that seemed to push back the shadows. Yet deep within, the rancher sensed a tension threading through the air, a pulse of unspoken stories, lingering like the scent of smoke that hung heavy on the night breeze. As the biscuits took shape beneath their hands, the rancher's thoughts drifted back to the last time laughter had graced these walls, a vivid memory that had long tempered the warmth of his heart. He recalled the sound of his daughter's giggles as she chased butterflies across the porch, the golden sun streaming through her hair, illuminating the very essence of joy and innocence. That day had unfolded beneath a sky painted in perfect hues, an unblemished tableau of childhood bliss. Yet the sweetness of those moments was eclipsed by the weight of what had transpired shortly thereafter, a spectre that still haunted him. His gaze fell upon Emma, her small hands working diligently beside him, and the resemblance struck him like a thunderclap. In her concentration, he caught glimpses of his daughter's spirit, the same unyielding determination, the same spark of life that had once filled their home. But that spark had dimmed when the illness had swept through, leaving in its wake a chasm of sorrow that swallowed everything whole. The rancher felt the weight of that loss surge anew, grief crashing over him like unrelenting waves. He swallowed hard, suddenly overwhelmed by the flickering memories of laughter turned to silence, an echoing emptiness that felt all too familiar. Daniel, observing the rancher's momentary stillness, shifted his focus to Emma. He had seen the remnants of grief etched in the rancher's features, a mask of stoicism that only thinly veiled the ache underneath. In the brief silence, he shared a knowing look with the rancher, a bond forged through the recognition of their individual pasts, the scars they bore like badges of survival. Daniel felt the tension in the air shift as he turned to Emma, focusing on her, hoping to weave the fabric of their shared experience into something tangible that might pull the rancher back from the brink of his memories. "Emma?" Daniel ventured gently, his voice breaking through the silence. "What did you like to do with your daddy?" The question hung heavy in the air, a gentle poke into the tenderness of her heart. Emma paused, her small hands stilling for a moment as her gaze drifted to the fire, the flickering light dancing across her features. The rancher felt a tightness in his chest, an unbidden fear that he had unintentionally cracked open the delicate shell of the child's heart. Yet he held his breath, hungering for her response. "I liked to watch him work on the barn," she finally whispered, her voice soft yet resolute, the weight of her past pressing upon each syllable. "He'd let me help with the horses and tell me stories." The sincerity in her words sparked something deep within the rancher, a shared bond of loss, the realization that they were both navigating the labyrinth of grief together. The laughter that had filled the ranch was now intertwined with their shared sorrow, and yet they were persevering, finding light in the act of creation. As Emma spoke, the firelight flickered in her eyes, illuminating a resilience that echoed the strength he had seen in his own daughter, a reflection of hope, taking root against the backdrop of their pain. In that moment, the rancher and Daniel exchanged a glance laden with understanding, a silent pact stirring between them. They might never fully escape the shadows of their past, but together they could forge a path toward healing, a connection stitched together by the laughter of a child and the warmth of shared memories, offering solace in the brokenness. As the night stretched on, they returned to their task, hands working the dough, hearts slowly opening like the first buds of spring. In the heart of darkness, they had unearthed a flicker of light, an ember of hope igniting within the solitude of the Broken Spoke Ranch, a spark that was destined to grow. The air grew thick with the warmth of camaraderie as they continued to knead the dough, laughter weaving through the stillness of the night. Emma's eagerness to share her memories of her father brought a brightness that filled the void within the rancher, each word a thread that pulled him closer to the child beside him. Yet as the biscuits took shape, the rancher felt an unsettling tension coil within him, a whisper of doubt curling around the edges of his heart. Could he truly take her in, embrace the responsibility of guiding her through the tempest of grief? With each laughter shared, there was the ghost of his own daughter's laughter haunting him, a reminder of what he had lost and what it might cost to open his heart again. Daniel, catching the flicker of uncertainty in the rancher's eyes, continued to craft the dough at his side. He recognized the struggle unfolding beneath the surface, the rancher's discomfort layered among the fleeting joy they were creating together. He turned his focus to Emma, her small hands working tirelessly with the dough, but her gaze kept drifting toward the rancher, seeking reassurance that he was present, that he understood the weight of her loss mirrored his own. The moment was fragile, the air heavy with expectation, each heartbeat pulsing with the unarticulated fear of stepping too far into the light for fear of being swallowed by the dark once more. "Will you teach me how to ride just like my daddy did?" Emma suddenly asked, her excitement coloring her voice. The question pierced through the rancher's heart like an arrow, pulling him back from the recesses of his own grief. She looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes, her earnestness both endearing and terrifying. He felt the weight of her hope hanging in the air, an expectation that rooted him to the spot. Yet a part of him recoiled at the thought of opening that door. The image of his daughter riding alongside him danced through his mind, a bittersweet memory he was not sure he could bear to relive with another child. His hesitation hung in the air, and the silence that followed felt like a chasm opening between them. Emma's smile faltered, the spark of excitement dimming in the face of his uncertainty. "You don't want me to, do you?" she asked quietly, the tremor in her voice revealing the crack in her hope. The rancher's heart raced as he grappled with the intensity of her gaze, the fragility of her spirit exposed in that moment of vulnerability. The question felt like a ripple in the pond, casting shadows over what had been a sanctuary of warmth and laughter. I need to think about it, Emma," he finally replied, struggling to find the right words. "It's been a long time since I've had someone in my life." His voice, thick with emotion, faltered under her scrutiny. Daniel shifted uneasily, sensing the tension rise, but felt compelled to leave them to navigate the delicate web of connection and uncertainty woven between them. The rancher's heart ached, caught in a tight vice of longing and fear, as Emma's gaze fell to the ground, her small fingers tracing patterns in the flower-covered surface before her. The space between them seemed to stretch, filled with unspoken fear and doubt. Emma's eyes glistened, the weight of his reply crashing down like a wave of disappointment. The laughter that had woven them together moments ago now felt fragile, teetering on the brink of unraveling. The rancher's heart sank as he watched her retreat into silence, her small form shrinking beneath the weight of his words. In that moment, he knew they both stood on a precipice, a delicate balance of hope and fear that could either lead them to redemption or plunge them into despair. And as the night deepened around them, the warmth of connection flickered, leaving an unsettling chill in its wake, a reminder of the difficulties still to come on their path toward healing. As the evening deepened, a stillness settled over the Broken Spoke Ranch, a deceptive quiet that clung to the air like the dust on the wooden porch. The rancher, kneeling beside Emma and Daniel, felt the tension linger in the space between them. He had seen the spark of hope extinguished in her eyes, her enthusiasm replaced by a shadow of disappointment that mirrored his own inner turmoil. In that moment, he longed to reach out, to bridge the chasm that had momentarily widened between them. But uncertainty wrapped around him like a shroud, pulling him deeper into the fears he had long kept at bay. Just as the fire crackled softly in the background, its warmth now a distant memory, a sudden rustling in the brush beyond the corral pierced the silence. The rancher's head snapped up, instincts honed by years of solitude and vigilance taking over. The night air, which had felt soothing moments before, now thickened with an unspoken dread. His heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing against the dark, searching for the source of the disturbance. Emma sensed his change in demeanor, her small hands pausing mid-need, uncertainty washing over her features as she glanced from the rancher to Daniel. "Did you hear that?" she asked softly, her voice quavering as it broke the quiet. The rancher nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. It was not uncommon for wild animals to roam the outskirts of the ranch, but tonight felt different, as if the land itself held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Daniel straightened, the weight of the atmosphere pressing down upon them. He exchanged a knowing glance with the rancher, both men aware that they needed to remain vigilant. They were no longer just three isolated souls. They were now bound by a shared purpose to protect this fragile bond they had only just begun to form. Suddenly, the sound intensified, a series of low growls echoing through the night. The rancher's pulse quickened as he recognized the danger encroaching upon their sanctuary. A pack of coyotes, emboldened by hunger, had ventured closer than usual. A flash of instinct surged through him, a protective urge igniting as he turned away from the firelight to scan the dim expanse. The ranch was a world of shadows, and though it felt like home, there was a vulnerability in its isolation. He still clutched the mound of dough in his hands, but the warmth of their shared laughter faded against the creeping encroachment, and he felt the weight of responsibility tugging at his resolve. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice low but firm, and Emma instinctively stepped closer to him, seeking comfort in his presence. The bond they had begun to forge felt more fragile now, as if the night's encroaching threats could shatter it in an instant. Daniel instinctively positioned himself at the edge of the porch, his posture tense as he peered into the darkness, prepared for whatever might emerge. The rancher, heart racing, stood between them, the warmth of the fire gradually eclipsed by the sense of vulnerability that had taken root in his chest. The growls grew louder, drawing nearer, and with a sudden flash, pale shapes emerged from the tree line, coyotes, their eyes glowing with cunning intent. The rancher felt a surge of adrenaline course through him, fear and protectiveness colliding. He pivoted, facing the approaching pack, brandishing a nearby shovel as a makeshift weapon. "Get back inside," he commanded, his voice steady and resolute, as he took a protective stance in front of Emma and Daniel. The coyotes prowled closer, drawn by the firelight, their hungry eyes fixed on the trio with an insatiable hunger. Their presence a stark reminder of the ever-looming dangers of the world beyond the ranch. As the pack skirted the edges of the property, the rancher felt the weight of his promise to Emma pressing heavily upon his soul. He had offered her a sanctuary, an invitation to find shelter from the storms of life, and now he stood as a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. Each growl reverberated through his being, a rallying cry to protect her innocence and the fragile bond that had begun to blossom. In that moment he understood that the stakes were higher than he had anticipated. It was not merely his heart that hung in the balance, but the safety of the child beside him, the chance for them both to find healing, even amidst the lurking threats of the night. As the coyotes prowled, their growls echoing through the darkness, the rancher felt a tightening in his chest, a silent oath to protect Emma and honor the fragile bond that had begun to blossom between them. The fire crackled softly behind him, its warmth an illusory comfort against the cold bite of fear that seeped into the night. He stood tall, shovel gripped tightly in his weathered hands, feeling the pulse of duty surge through him. Emma, just a few steps behind, clutched her doll to her chest, eyes wide and fearful, yet resolute in her silent loyalty to the man who had offered her refuge. Daniel shifted beside them, his presence a steady anchor, as the three of them formed an unyielding barrier against the looming threat. The rancher flicked a glance at Emma, who was now watching him with a mixture of awe and trust, her small figure barely trembling amidst the tension. He felt something stir within him, a protective instinct that had long been dormant, now ignited by the sight of her delicate frame standing firm beside him. In this moment, they were somehow united by a shared understanding. Three souls confronting the wild terrors of life together, unspoken loyalty weaving them into a single entity against the encroaching darkness. The coyotes ventured closer, their frantic energy electrifying the atmosphere, and the rancher's heart quickened in response. He remained motionless, every instinct attuned to the predators circling them, yet a flicker of something else sparked in him. Courage. A conviction blossomed within, an unshakable belief that there was strength in their unity, even in the face of nature's fierce realities. He turned slightly, shifting his body to shield Emma with one arm, while keeping his eyes fixed on the advancing pack, epitomizing a protector's resolve in the tense silence. Emma's small hand slipped into his, her grip delicate yet firm, a lifeline connecting them even amidst the chaos. The rancher felt the warmth of her touch seep into him, grounding him as the coyotes growled in collaboration, searching for weakness. Daniel, ever vigilant, shifted closer, their three bodies merging together, morphing into a fortress against the primal forces that loomed outside their makeshift home. The rancher could sense the pulse of their unity, a harmonious rhythm born from grief and hope mingling in the night air, resilient against the darkness threatening to engulf them. Minutes stretched into a tense eternity, each growl a testament to the reality of life and death that lurked a breath away. The rancher held his ground, every muscle coiled and ready. Yet it was the bond he shared with Emma and Daniel that fortified him, an invisible thread that wrapped around their hearts. In that moment, they stood together, a silent pact forged in the fires of loss, each one carrying their own scars while finding strength in one another's presence. The coyotes, sensing the resolve radiating from the trio, began to circle back, their growls fading into the vastness of the night. As silence descended again, the rancher released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The danger had passed, yet the weight of the moment lingered, knitting their hearts closer together. Emma's courageous spirit had blossomed amid fear, her small hand still clasped within his as the fire flickered gently beside them. The rancher turned to her, his gaze lingering upon the light in her eyes that had momentarily pushed back the shadows of grief. He realized then that they were not merely survivors of loss, but budding companions, ready to face whatever life had in store for them. By standing together, they had carved a sanctuary in the night, one that could withstand even the most menacing threats that loomed beyond the comforts of the Broken Spoke Ranch. The flickering firelight cast long shadows across the rugged porch of the Broken Spoke Ranch, the tension from the recent encounter lingering in the air like the remnants of smoke. The rancher crouched low, still gripping the shovel, while Emma's small hand remained clasped in his. A profound silence enveloped them, each heartbeat echoing the weight of unspoken truths that lay just beneath the surface. The stars twinkled above, remnants of light from a cosmos far removed from their earthly struggles, yet they offered no comfort against the darkness that had become a constant companion in their lives. He glanced at Emma, who stood resolute yet fragile beside him, her doll nestled tightly against her chest. The innocence etched on her face, a tender mix of defiance and vulnerability, was strikingly familiar. It awakened memories of another time, another child who had laughed upon this very porch, chasing after dreams and butterflies with an untamed spirit. The ache of loss pierced through him, a reminder of the void that had swallowed his own daughter, leaving echoes of her joy scattered like fallen leaves around the ranch. The grip of grief held him fast, making it seem impossible to move forward. Yet here was Emma, a living testament to hope, eager to stake her claim on a world that had been cruel. As the fire flickered, casting warm light around them, the rancher felt an urge to share a piece of himself, a truth that had long remained buried under layers of sorrow and solitude. He turned to Emma, his heart pounding against the weight of his own hesitance. "You remind me of my daughter," he said softly, the words barely escaping his lips, as if revealing the depths of his heart might shatter the fragile bond they had begun to forge. Emma looked up, her wide eyes reflecting the firelight, curious and unflinching. He felt the need to explain, to bridge the distance between their stories, a yearning to offer her a glimpse into the life he had once lived. "Her name was Clara," he continued, his breath hitching as the name escaped him, unlocking a flood of memories that had been tucked away in the corners of his heart. "She used to help me work on the ranch, just like you're doing now. Every time I see you, it feels like she's here again." His voice quivered, the weight of sorrow spilling into the stillness of the night. He watched as Emma's expression softened, her small brow knitting together in understanding. It was as though she could feel the essence of the little girl who had danced in the sun, bringing laughter to the barren land. In that shared silence, something shifted, a fragile connection forged in the reverberations of their shared pain. Emma squeezed his hand tighter, a gesture both innocent and profound, as if to say that she understood the depths of loss without fully grasping its weight. The rancher's heart swelled, an unexpected warmth igniting the corners of his grief as they stood together, a living testament to resilience in the face of despair. The echoes of the past mingled with the promise of a new beginning, and in the shared memory of a lost child, perhaps there was a flicker of healing awaiting them both. Daniel, still perched watchfully at the edge of their makeshift circle, felt the power of the moment unfolding. He had witnessed the resilience of the human spirit many times over, yet in this instance he sensed a rare bond knitting together the broken threads of their lives. It was a reparative force operating in the shadows, urging him to lean into the light. He, too, knew the burden of loss too well, and in the midst of the palpable silence, he decided to step forward, extending a hand of solidarity. "We all have our losses," he offered gently, the weight of his own grief coloring his words with authenticity, creating shared space for the rancher and Emma to feel less alone in their sorrow. The rancher turned to Daniel, his expression shifting from one of caution to tentative understanding. They were all woven from the same fabric, the threads of heartache and longing connecting their lives in ways they had yet to fully comprehend. The moment hung heavy with meaning, a fragile promise taking root in the heart of the night. Together, they stood not just as survivors, but as allies on an uncharted path toward healing, each one lifting the other as they moved forward through the darkness. In that stillness, the fire crackled to life once more, casting an amber glow on their faces and illuminating the unbroken chain of hope connecting them. The rancher inhaled deeply, sensing the weight of possibility hovering in the air, and he slowly released the shovel, allowing it to rest against the wooden railing. Together, they had confronted a darkness filled with uncertainty, yet within that darkness, a fragile light began to emerge, a shared understanding that out of grief could come connection, and from the ashes of their losses, the promise of something beautiful could blossom. As dawn broke over the Broken Spoke Ranch, the sun's first light pierced through the horizon, spilling golden rays across the landscape. The rancher emerged from sleep, stirred by the haunting memories that accompanied the quiet of the early morning. He glanced over to the makeshift bed beneath the porch, where Emma lay curled up snugly in her blanket, a small mound of innocence amidst the sprawling emptiness of the ranch. The warmth of the sunrise felt foreign against his skin, and as he pushed back the remnants of sleep, a heaviness settled in his chest, a warning that today would bring challenges that lay just beyond the edge of their fragile bond. Stepping outside, the rancher took a deep breath, the fresh air tinged with the earthy aroma of dew-kissed grass, mixing with the faint scent of smoke still lingering from last night's fire. Emma stirred awake at the sound of his footsteps, blinking sleep from her eyes, her innocent smile breaking across her face like the dawn itself. In that moment, the rancher felt a flicker of hope intertwined with the anxiety that gripped him. How could he possibly protect this child from the world that had taken so much from him? They shared a sacred connection, yet every part of him feared the potential for loss that loomed larger than the rolling hills in the distance. "We're going to work together today," he said, his voice steadying as he crouched beside Emma. "I need your help with the horses." She nodded enthusiastically, her small fingers brushing against the doll she clutched tighter, ready to embrace the day's challenge. As they worked side by side, a rhythm emerged between them, an unspoken dance forged in laughter and determination, each moment stitching the threads of their bond tighter. Yet in the back of the rancher's mind, unease gnawed at him, a lingering dread that today might test the limits of their newly formed connection. Their first task was to feed the horses, a seemingly simple chore, yet as they approached the paddock, the rancher felt the tension in the air thicken, a warning he couldn't ignore. The horses, usually docile companions, shifted restlessly, their instincts sensing something amiss. With each step closer, the rancher's heart raced, echoing the uncertainty that pulsed through him. Emma, keenly aware of the change, hesitated, glancing up at him with wide, questioning eyes. The rancher met her gaze, fighting the urge to shield her from what they both might have to confront, yet instinct told him to proceed with caution. Then it happened. A sudden commotion erupted as a wild stallion, spooked by an unseen presence, burst forth from behind the stable, charging across the paddock. The rancher's adrenaline surged, his instincts kicking in as he instinctively stepped in front of Emma, his body a shield against the chaos unfolding before them. "Back up!" he shouted, urgency lacing his voice as the stallion careened toward them, hooves pounding against the earth like thunder. Emma stumbled, fear flashing in her eyes, and in the split second that followed, the rancher's heart wrenched at the thought of losing her, the bond they had forged suddenly precarious under the weight of this unforeseen threat. Instinctively, he reached for Emma's hand, pulling her behind him just as the wild stallion veered off course, narrowly missing them as it took flight into the open pasture. Hot breath escaped his lips as he turned to Emma, fear written across his features. The moment stretched, suspended in time, the weight of the world around them amplified by the echoes of what had just transpired. Emma's eyes brimmed with tears, and the rancher knelt down, wiping the remnants of fear from her cheek with his calloused hand, feeling the tremors that pulsed through her small frame. "Hey, it's all right," he murmured, his voice turning soft, wrapping around them both like a protective shroud. "You're safe now." In that moment, he realized that their bond had not only been tested, but had also deepened in the face of fear. They had faced the wildness of the world together, and though the rancher's heart still raced, he understood that he could no longer let the shadows of his past dictate his future. With Emma beside him, he could cultivate not just a haven for their hearts, but a sanctuary where healing might bloom amid even the fiercest storms. The rancher knelt before Emma, his heart still racing from the chaos of moments before. She stared at him with those wide, innocent eyes that held both fear and trust, her small frame trembling slightly from the adrenaline that coursed through her. He felt the weight of their shared experience hanging in the air, an unspoken bond forged not just in laughter, but now in the face of danger. He could see the flicker of resilience shining through her tears, and in that moment he understood that it was not enough to merely protect her. He needed to guide her, to teach her how to navigate this unpredictable world they inhabited together. "Let's get back to the barn," he said softly, his voice steadying into a calm presence amidst the residual chaos. He extended his hand to her, a silent invitation and reassurance that they could face whatever hurdles lay ahead. Emma hesitated briefly, but then grasped his hand with a determination that struck him as both unexpected and beautiful. As they moved together, he could feel their hearts beating in tandem, merging their fears into a united front. In that act of simple connection, he felt the flicker of hope ignite once more, a hope that whispered of healing, of a future brighter than the shadows that had haunted them. The barn loomed ahead, familiar yet tinged with uncertainty. The rancher swept open the heavy doors, allowing a cascade of warm light to flood the interior, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. The horses stirred in their stalls, their movements soothing in the aftermath of the earlier turmoil. Emma's grip on his hand tightened as she stepped inside, her gaze scanning the interior before resting on the gentle sway of a mare. The sight of the creature ignited a spark of interest in her eyes, a flicker of joy that cut through the remnants of fear. The rancher watched as she approached the horse cautiously, her instincts guiding her, and he felt a swell of pride mix with the shadows of doubt that had loomed over him since their first encounter. "Easy now," he murmured, stepping beside her and guiding her hand toward the horse's soft muzzle. Emma's fingers brushed the mare's warm coat, and in that moment, the rancher saw her spirit begin to recover, the fear of the morning dissipating into something beautiful and unbreakable. It was a moment wrapped in tenderness, the bond they shared growing stronger as each second passed. The rancher allowed himself to breathe, relishing in the warmth radiating from Emma, the laughter that bubbled up from her chest as the mare nuzzled against her gently, offering a small comfort amid the uncertainty that still danced at the fringes of their lives. Hours passed as they worked side by side, lost in the rhythm of feeding and grooming the horses, the weight of yesterday's sorrows fading with each shared laugh and soft exchange. As they toiled, the rancher felt a lightness begin to settle in his chest, an unexpected joy creeping into the corners of his heart. He caught glimpses of Emma's laughter, her spirit unearthing memories from his own childhood, a time turned bittersweet, yet untouched by the sorrows that had since colored his world. The transformation taking place before him was nothing short of miraculous. He could see her spirit brightening, and with it, the shadows of his own grief seemed to wane. Eventually, as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting it in hues of lavender and gold, the rancher and Emma stood together, watching the horses graze peacefully in the pasture. A sense of calm washed over him, a realization dawning that perhaps this bond they were cultivating was rooted in something deeper than mere circumstance. It was a chance for him to embrace the future, to rediscover a kind of love that had felt lost and buried for far too long. As he glanced down at Emma, the light spilling over her features, he felt a sense of clarity. "Emma," he said softly, the words rising to the surface of his heart like the dawn, "you can stay here forever, if that's what you want." Her eyes widened in surprise, disbelief shining brightly against the backdrop of the setting sun. It was a promise filled with all the gravity of their shared pasts, the weight of their sorrow transformed into an invitation for new beginnings. Emma beamed, her joy pure and untainted, illuminating the twilight that surrounded them. And with that, within the heart of the Broken Spoke Ranch, they began to transform their scars into something beautiful, for together they could forge a new life, one woven with the threads of hope, healing, and the promise of family. The sun dipped lower beneath the horizon, casting a warm glow over the Broken Spoke Ranch, where the echoes of laughter now intertwined with the evening breeze. The rancher stood beside Emma, their hands still connected, feeling the strength of their newly forged bond coursing between them. The weight of loss that had for so long anchored him began to lift, replaced by a burgeoning sense of hope that filled the air with a vibrant clarity. As they watched the horses graze, he could feel the shadows of his past gradually receding, revealing the contours of a future he hadn't dared to envision until now. Emma's laughter rang out, a sound so pure it felt like a balm against the rugged landscape. In that moment, the rancher turned to her, his expression softened by the light that danced in her eyes. She beamed with an infectious joy, her small stature dwarfed by the vastness of the ranch, but undeterred by its enormity. The rancher knelt before her, meeting her gaze with earnestness. He saw in her the spirit of a child untouched by the scars of the world, and he felt a surge of protective warmth wash over him. "You know, we can make a team," he said, his voice low yet steady, as if he were sharing a secret that could change everything. Emma nodded vigorously, her small hands gesturing to the barn, an unspoken agreement hanging in the air between them. Together they began to plot their course, tasks that needed doing, projects yet to unfold. They discussed ideas for a new garden by the barn, a place where flowers could bloom and paint the landscape with colors that would rival the sunsets. Each plan sparked laughter and dreams, mingling together in the twilight. And for the first time in years, the rancher felt the warm tendrils of anticipation wrapping around his heart, coaxing him to step into the promise of a new beginning. As they gathered their supplies from the barn, Emma skipped ahead, her laughter a trail of light leading him forward. The rancher followed, feeling a lightness he hadn't known for so long. The evening air was thick with the scent of earth and hay, mingling with the fading daylight, and he inhaled deeply, a renewed appreciation for the land that had once felt so heavy with grief. They passed the horses, and the rancher felt a connection to the gentle creatures that seemed to share in their joy, their heads bobbing in contentment. "See, they're happy to have us," he said, glancing sideways at Emma, who giggled before reaching out to stroke a mare's neck. Under the dimming light, the two of them began to work side by side, planting seeds in a small patch of earth outside the barn. Emma's fingers danced in the soil, and the rancher handed her seeds with careful precision, teaching her the way to bury them just right. With each seed nestled into the ground, he felt as though they were planting the very essence of hope, a promise of life and love that would blossom before their eyes. Emma beamed at him with each planted seed, her laughter rising into the twilight, a melody that echoed against the mountains like a sweet serenade of renewal. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, the rancher paused, allowing the tranquility of the moment to wash over him. He turned to Emma, who was dusting her hands off with a wide grin, her face aglow with pride. In her presence, the emptiness of his heart began to fill, expanding to accommodate the joy that had started to seep in. The remnants of his past faded like the last glimmers of daylight. "You know, you can always stay here with me," he said softly, the words spilling forth like a prayer into the night. "We can build something beautiful together." Emma's eyes widened at his words, surprise mingling with disbelief, and then unadulterated joy simmered in her expression. "Really?" she whispered, barely able to contain the light breaking across her face. The rancher smiled, feeling the warmth of her gaze wrap around his heart, a promise unfolding in the twilight. As they stood together under the vastness of the night sky, he felt the weight of their separate pasts lifting into the air, replaced by the shared breath of a hopeful new beginning, a chance to heal, to nurture, and to embrace the beauty of connection that life had gifted them amidst the shadows of loss.